we want to make sure we give as much time to that. But this next section, you can kick back. It's like lecture style, but we're gonna go into just like this whole new phase that we're getting into, the connected dots phase. So today I'm gonna go into some definitions like I tend to do, and then just a little bit of an explainer, and then segue off and hand off to Ashley to share what kind of activities that we need to do for this phase to like bring all that stuff together. So next slide. Okay, so good. So like in this last stretch of the fellowship, we're moving into taking all our research work and being able to synthesize and review and reflect on all this information that we've gathered so far, right? So we'll be doing that and really looking at that, and that's going to inform how we start to plan how we're going to implement our projects or events, right? So we're going to use that information to prioritize and decide how to incorporate all the insights that we're learning right now into our projects. We're going to start bringing all our research and activities and the writing that we've been doing together into like one coherent program brief or guide of some sort, so it's all packaged for you right there, ready to go. This is a time also for us to be organizing our teams for implementation. I mean, we've been trying to organize each other this entire fellowship, but now putting on your like implementation helmet, essentially, not even a hat, but just like your astronaut helmet, ready to go to like figure out like who's going to be doing what and when are they going to be doing those things to get to your date, right? Whatever that program date is, if it's the start of something or multiple days or whatever that is. And we'll also be just working together to develop an implementation plan. So that's everything from just laying out your timeline and your to-dos and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's happening in this last stretch. Go to the next slide. So what I'm going to jump into is just talking about, we're in this phase, we're about to go into synthesis. But what is synthesis, right? Synthesis is the external and collaborative process that really helps you and your team make sense of the information that you've gathered so far. By synthesizing the information that you've gathered so far, you can surface really key insights that are going to help inform the design of your program. And this thing on the right, it really bridges a gap between observing and making. So now, before, you've been studying, you've been reading, you've been thinking, you've been absorbing, you've been experiencing all these things. But now, like, how do you turn that and manifest that into making something, making your programs essentially, right? Next slide. Essentially, the synthesis process is kind of like this, right? And before I jump into this, and you're wondering like, why is there laundry hanging at the corner of this slide? But let's think about like doing your laundry, right? Gathering the dirty clothes around your house, sticking it in the laundry, washer, washing it, drying it, however you need to, and then like taking that out and saying, okay, I gotta fold all this stuff. I gotta fold my shirts, I gotta fold my underwear and my socks. And then it's like, especially if it's not just you, it's like, where did those go? Into the closet, into the drawer. What is this, sock that had like single sock? Where'd the other one go? There's all this having to sort things out and then figuring out where those things go. So I want you to just sort of think about this laundry metaphor when you think about synthesizing. So when the synthesis process is essentially you and your team really deconstructing. So number one, deconstructing everything you've heard and laying out all those notes and putting your brain out there and like really seeing what matters. And then that moves quickly into externalizing it. So a lot of this stuff is on docs, it's inside things, in your brain, all that stuff. But this is the time now to lay it all out with your team and have these open discussions and open debates about what are you finding, right? And what's important for your program. And then it's like sorting that all out. So folding the laundry and figuring out what kind of piles to make, right? And finding the relationships between all the research and secondary research and everything that you've been doing to understand like what's surfacing here. Are there things that I didn't know about that a lot of people are saying now, is there new information or data that I really need to take into account when I think about designing my program? Those things will surface and together you'll be finding those relationships. And then when you see all that information more kind of cleanly presented to yourselves, then it's easier to plan a path forward. What can we do? What are things maybe that are like pretty overwhelming that we need to shelve a little bit. Like Jamila, you're talking about already realizing the focus may be on self-care, that you have these constraints, and that, you know, there's a little bit of an adjustment that needs to be made. So you're already going through this synthesis in a way, right, viscerally. And so you're learning what path to take forward, and what things maybe you just need to leave to the side of that path for the while, or things that, you know, maybe later is a nice to have kind of thing. So that's essentially the process here. Next slide. And y'all catch me if I'm speaking too fast, and let me know if you have any questions along the way. But kind of jumping into like, why is synthesis important, right? It lets everyone on your team share their experiences and of like how they've understood the problem, because you all are doing interviews differently, you read things differently, you listen to things differently, like Kyla was saying. And so you want to know what your team is thinking, because probably everybody's got a little bit of a different way of thinking about how your program should go down, right? It allows teams to review the research activities together. It helps your team see new opportunities. It reveals new ideas or findings that you never thought of maybe, or never heard of before maybe. And that all just kind of gets, like, again, it gets all that information out of your brain, off of the paper, into a shared space for you all. I'll pause there. Are there other things that folks think, like why the synthesis time is important to them?
Well, I could tell you it's important because it also makes me reflect. Like this, we could say this is synthesis right now. This group, this meeting right now, because listening to everybody and a fellow and talking, and I'm realizing sometimes I need to step back and I, you know, when you have a whole bunch of ideas in your head, you just want to put it and put it, and then you wind up failing because you just. But listening to everybody and their ideas and then feedback for me is calming me down. I tend to overdo it and over worry myself, so now it's giving me a refresh. It's less worry.
Right.
If you understand,
Right.
it's like I don't
Totally.
have a headache.
Totally feel you there. And it's also just like relinquishing some control of things, right? You've got to rely on your community, your voices, your visionaries, to help you determine what's best for your community, right? It doesn't all land on your shoulders to do all of that. So you're relying now on all this extra information to help guide what should be designed, right? But one of the things I also, Arabia, you're coming off mute. You have something to say?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. If there's not enough time, I don't have to though.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I was gonna say I think also it allows, kind of like what Jamila was saying, to scope your project and just like really think about what's the most important things that need to get done. I know like usually like when building like apps and stuff, like you think about this in terms of like features. But I feel like in terms of like community design or service design, be like all the little things that you want to make your program perfect, like mentorship, um, or like this grand pipeline or whatever, and like really trying to
Right.
think about what's realistic and setting goals that you could, you know, reach in a timely manner that
Yep.
doesn't burn you out.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, you know, I wanted to also emphasize, and you'll see a lot in these bullets, right? Team togetherness, you know, sharing, all that stuff. Synthesis takes good teamwork, you know? So this is a time where it's really important for your team to align on the things that matter most to all of you, you know? And, you know, what surfaces during synthesis will really inform how you shape your project. So you may debate what's good to focus on or what to prioritize, but that's healthy. But really make sure you're setting up your teams to share that space, right? And because everybody's done the hard work together, so everybody should be able to together determine the path forward. So I just want folks to keep that in mind, for leads of teams to also just kind of keep in mind, like when you're figuring all this out, how are you sharing that kind of power and determination with your teams? Next slide. And I'll try to quickly blast through these sections. So, quickly, insights, one more definition. So an insight, it's a piece of information that highlights not only new or interesting findings, but it also helps you understand people's motivations, behaviors, and choices. So your synthesis will generate these types of insights. And so here on the right, you'll see insights. There are common themes or issues that are often found across several areas of your research. They help you validate, or challenge any assumptions you had before coming into the research, and they fill knowledge gaps and reveal hidden truths. So I've been kind of saying that the whole way through. So that's quick definition of the insights. It's also on your master doc if you need to find that again. Next slide. This graphic I presented to y'all kind of earlier on of like secondary research plus your primary research, this talk to people stuff that you're doing will generate your insights. But let's go to the next slide here. But what we want to acknowledge in addition to that we didn't add earlier is that your experience and your community knowledge that you've taken with you for many a years also contributes to those insights. So please don't forget that as well as you're figuring out your next steps. And so essentially with this equation, next slide, what it all adds up to is all that stuff, the equal sign is where your synthesis happens, right? And that's going to generate and push you into this insights and making space. Before I finish my super quick lecture on connecting the dots, next slide, I just wanted to add, I hope all of you remember this graphic when we were doing that kind of design 101 about divergent and convergent thinking here. And just reminding you about this mindset that we're in. Right now, most of you and your brains are on this, the right side of the slide, the using logic, data, rules, and research piece. And so you're going to be taking that all to help you shift back over to the bluish, the using creativity and curiosity brain side now too. So we're, again, divergent, convergent thinking here. So you're just pointing out what kind of moment you're in right now. I think that's all I got to say today. If you have any other questions about Connect the Dots, of course, feel free to reach out. We're here to help, but I'm going to segue over to Ashley here, who's going to just go into like, okay, now, great, thanks for that lecture, but how are we going to do this? So she's going to introduce to you the activities that will help you get to all these things. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Mari. Yes, so going to talk about there's many ways to do synthesis. A lot of them are extremely messy. A lot of them usually are hundreds of Post-it notes on a wall and you're moving them all around and you're sort of grouping them and you're throwing some away and you're really, we don't have that luxury of having a physical space to put up all these things, right? We don't have the luxury of kind of writing in our documents and making sure we're all aligned and coming back up. So this is really, I want to emphasize, this is a very low level way of doing synthesis, a very quick way of doing synthesis. There are many other ways to do synthesis that take a lot more time, a lot more research, and just a lot more time. It's really just time to do. So we have done our best to sort of crunch what is synthesis into one document that will hopefully get you to a place to find insights about your interview. So this document has 3 exercises in it. So I'm going to tell you what those exercises are. It will be facilitated in breakout rooms after we close this out. So you're not going through this document alone. We're actually going to facilitate this with you together in a breakout room and get whatever you know down on the piece of paper. Now, we do want to rely on completed interviews, of course, but also know that your experience and knowledge of all of your communities is also research. And that's also research you've been doing for many years. So if you don't have interviews totally completed at this point, you can still work on this document because you come from a community that you've learned from for years. So obviously, interviews are the best way to get really concrete, small ideas and pinpoint questions, right? But you already come with a whole background of lived experience and knowledge just from living in a community alone. So I don't want anybody to be, worried if you didn't do your interviews yet. If you please continue to do your interviews, they will only make you better, but also know that you can rely on some of the knowledge you have. But we love interviews because sometimes we all get a little biased, think we know what we're saying, and we just need to recheck that with community, right? So So in this section, the top section of it, we will do a high level debrief. So you know how I showed you how to do a debrief on an interview a couple weeks ago where we kind of talked out loud and then we grouped them and stuff. We're going to do like a real low level of that where we just kind of write separately together and then we'll come together and write it out together. And this is where we'll get our insights, our key insights. Again, defining insights here, they're the key pieces of information that highlight not only an interesting or new thing, but also helps us understand people's motivations, behaviors, and choices that can inform how we make our programs. The second activity is a value proposition chart. This is like the beginning, the stepping stone to a business canvas model. So this is the first step of it essentially, which says, this is a tool that can help ensure that your program and service is positioned around what the community voices value and need. And that's what we think of as our pains and gains. So with the people that you've talked through, we're really going to lift up, what is the pain of trying to experience, for instance, connecting to Zoom or connecting to folks in community who want to organize together, but may not know how to use Zoom, right? Marquise, that's an example. A gain is something that benefits the community and address and kind of connects that expectation and need and would increase their likelihood of joining a program like yours from their perspective. So what are the things that they're good at or want to find out about themselves that they can attach to in your program? We'll also walk you through this. So don't worry, we have questions, we have prompts, we'll get you there. The third section is a high level journey map. So a journey map is a way that you can walk a persona through your program or service. Sometimes all our knowledge about how the thing will operate is up in our heads. Oh, I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this. But sometimes we might lose sight of the person who's gonna be part of that service, right? So we wanna make sure that we do that journey map from the perspective of the person you want in your program. So in this case, Marquise, it would be one of the advisory boards that you want to get connected to Zoom and someone from there. Arabia, it would be someone who is in NYCHA who may be lower high risk, 18 to 24 years old, right? What would that person do to get a part of that? Jamila, how would a woman in your community who is struggling kind of walk through your journey of wellness? So just a quick note on what a persona is. You heard me use this word persona. A persona is a made-up person. It's a made-up person that represents pieces of the real people we know. We don't want to call anybody out by name, say, hey, Barbara Kay from Marcy Houses, she said this, and she wants this. That's not, we don't want to call anybody out in any journey, but these are sort of like, a doll, basically, of what this person is. It's like, oh, this is my friend, and my friend who is 24 years old and is at high risk wants to go through this journey. And so this persona is a way to depersonalize from any one person that we know, but kind of represent a larger group of the people we want to talk to. And so that is the exercise. We are on a time, so we're going to try our best to start. We may not finish everything in the breakout rooms, and that's fine. We want to get it to a place that we've started it and you feel confident about those starts so that you can finish it together as a group on your own time, okay? So if we push you through an activity, it's not because we don't think you're doing amazing work and all these things. It's because we simply want to make sure that we go through all the exercises and you understand all the exercises so that when you leave class, you can work with your team and make sure to complete the activity. Any questions before we break up? Cool, let's go.